a little over halfway done.
It is Thursday, January 30th, and we're here to talk about Wayward Moon, The Wayward Moon by Janice Weizman. And I'm going to talk a little bit about her, and then I'll ask you what you thought about the book. And let's see here. Here she is. I always like to share what she looks like. I think it's important to picture her.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Hmm.
She looks kind of young.
Yeah, I think
And
that's the
then-
picture of her in the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. This is from her website. She's a Canadian-born writer living in Israel. Her historical novel, The Wayward Moon, was the recipient of the 2013 Independent Publisher Book Awards Gold Medal and winner of the 2013 Midwest Book Award. A selection of her other writings, including essays, articles, translations, and book reviews, can be found here. I get it. She's a graduate of the creative writing program at Bar Ilan. My girlfriend's daughter went there, and she founded and served as a fiction editor of the Ilan Note Review from 2009 to 2019. She's taught creative writing at David Yellin College in Jerusalem. Never heard of it. Given workshops at Israel's Writer Studio, the Writing Pan, and other venues. So she sounds like someone you could go out for a drink with. Did you like the book?
Yes.
Yes.
Very much.
We did this 12 years ago. Full transparency, I had to buy the book again because I couldn't find it.
I had to buy it too.
Right, and I had to read it over again, but I liked it as much the second time, and because it's just from a time we don't know anything about.
Right.
Well, I don't. And that just made it even more interesting, I thought. So, yeah. Now, I wanted to read, let's see here. I think this is from her website. Their reviews. She has out another book, and I'm going to have to look at that. It's called Our Little Histories. So, because I thought she was a good writer, and I thought that all was very good. And oh, I don't. So let's see here. So the first sentence of Janice Weizman's The Wayward Moon sets the stage with the clarity and precision. I, Rachel Bat Yair, was born in the city of Sura, and it's opening in the 9th century in what is today Iraq. The Wayward Moon is a historical novel about the ways in which traditional patriarchy constrains women and what happens when a woman is given the chance to experience choice and agency. The protagonist is 17-year-old Rachel, a Jewish daughter of a doting father who assumes her future as a wife and mother is set and secure, who neither asks questions nor challenges societal or familiar expectations, who neither knows differently nor dares otherwise. But in a flash, all the assurance must transfer itself into something much more complex, an ability to take a situation and think on your feet. And I thought it was, absolutely fascinating about, how she, all right, Susan.
Well, I would, when you asked if we liked the book, and I immediately said yes. The first time, I actually read it so long, pretty long ago because of what happened with cancellations and
Yes, and right.
So then I had to go back and
reread it.
And reread, but I didn't read every word again. But I had to remember what it was all about. And one of the things that I really liked so much about it was the ingenuity of this woman and how brave she was. And it showed that patriarchy doesn't work if you're up against smart, talented women who are courageous. And that is what I just loved about it.
Yeah. She did thwart them, you know, she was strong, she taught herself. And I also think, you know, I think about my mom, she's 91, and I need to ask her this because it's much easier to ask her what happened 40 years ago than what she had for breakfast today. But it's not, it's been until very recently, women couldn't have open checking accounts without their husbands, couldn't have credit cards. And, you know, if I think that young women today would be shocked to hear that. And, you know, although obviously, you know, her medieval times, it was worse. It didn't get better for, you know, 1,000 years. So, yeah, I thought she was brave. You know, I thought a little bit about Yentl because, you know, when she was in the monastery and, yeah. And, all right, Elaine, we are going to talk a little bit about the ending.
That's all right. Don't, it's
So
okay.
the man who she, you know, who she falls in love with is from England, Britannia. And it was spelled, you know, very curiously. And you know, he wasn't Jewish. And again, that hasn't changed either. That, you know, you can only, you know, marry well, that has changed actually, but until recently. So, and it hasn't changed in Israel. In Israel, to get married, it has to be a religious wedding, an Orthodox religious wedding. So you cannot, a Jew cannot marry a Christian or a Muslim or whatever. You have to go to Greece or America or wherever. And I also thought about, I thought her descriptions of the food was good. You know, she didn't like the food in the monastery.
Too plain.
Plain. Yeah, yeah.
Vegetables.
The author, Abby.
Yeah, I also did not read it until the very last minute and finished it about maybe 1:30 this morning, and then probably but about
You get a
8:30, I
star.
thought,
You
wait a
get a
second,
star for finishing
no, but about 8:30, I had to go back and read that last chapter because what am I missing here? And I still feel that I am missing something. But I was also reading it with totally a different lens, not in terms of the role of women, which I understand, but I think what struck me was the unexpected moments of kindness where it wasn't expected. And that's what kind of spoke to me in terms of, you know, these people out of a completely different whatever that all of a sudden did reach out. And you saw that, you know, periodically around the different cultures. And that's the part that I loved about it.
I'm glad that you picked that up, Paula.
Oh, I think that it was one of her masterful strengths was demonstrating the humanity between different groups.
Yeah.
That what we see now is not necessarily what was going on in the 9th century.
Right.
That there were still divisions, but
Right.
was a much richer religion than we look up back on it now. We look on it differently because of what's happened in our lifetimes.
Yeah. When they wrote the map for her, when she, you know, Andy.
The kindness is compounded by her willingness to accept it and to be trusting, which probably went against everything she had learned.
Yes.
And she opened herself up to several situations, as Evie and Paula said, where the kindness was unbelievable, yet she didn't run from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn.
Yeah, well, also she they did, it was very realistic because there was a time when she helped that man bring the books into the monastery and he kind of blew her off. So it was more realistic because not everybody was genuine in the way that others were.
Right. She's raped, you know, at the beginning of the book. And of course, you know, that just sets the fear level for me, and I thought that that was realistic. I had to go back to the beginning to remember that, you know, they found her
Mhm.
diary, and what should they do with it, and
Mhm.
that took me a hot minute there. So yeah. And okay, nice. The author has said that she deliberately created a heroine who was neither unique nor exceptional. Was this, in your opinion, a successful choice? Why?
I think she was a very successful choice because if, you know, it proved that a woman could do something on her own, be true to herself, be ingenious. It kind of rewrote a woman's history.
Right. I think she was exceptional, but
Uh,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't
She
know
was-
very many 17-year-olds who could do that.
no,
Who
She
did that
was
today.
certainly exceptional for a woman of those times.
right. And the desire to learn to read and write.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I recall is that was she the only child? And
Mhm.
if the father had had a son, he might not have lavished this attention on her.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's a sort of a trope or a theme I've seen in other books, but you know, it's very telling.
I thought it was, you know, she wanted to learn to read and read in Greek so she could read Antigone because that's what her dad, you know, had said to her. That was, I think that was age appropriate for a 17-year-old. And Leanne.
I was just struck by her will to live even when she didn't have the will to live.
Yeah.
And a couple times where she wanted to end her life. Um, her suffering was beyond anything any of us probably could relate to.
Yeah.
Not even for those times. And I just,
Yes.
you know, how wonderful it was with the people who encouraged her not to take her own life, you
Right.
know, that she had that choice, or that she would be able to choose things in her life. But I was just so struck by her
Yeah.
strength and resilience. I know that sounds kind of, you know, she was resilient, but beyond really imaginable for everything she had suffered.
Yeah. Merle.
I thought she had a flaw. She was a little bit vain. And when she went into
Really?
the marketplace in Baghdad and she was looking at the silk and she took her turban off, she put herself in such a dangerous situation.
Just did, yeah.
That's a very mother comment.
Yeah,
If
the
she-
other thing I didn't understand where she was in that situation is why didn't she cut her hair off when she was trying at first to pass as a boy? The first thing you'd have to do would be cut your hair off.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. You know, ask Barbara Streisand. And yeah,
But
yeah.
I think about her hair again. She kept imagining what she was going to look like as a bride. She was
Yeah.
holding the silk fabric up to herself and saying, I would look so beautiful as a bride. And I thought that was actually realistic, that a girl her age
Yeah.
couldn't be so mature.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, getting back to current events, you know, these young women are coming back from Gaza. They were there for 15 months, and I'm sure stories and stories are going to start to come out. And, you know, they were living in, you know, conditions, frankly, not unlike what, you know, Rachel lived in. And I think Leanne said, you know, the trauma that she had in her life was so great. And I think the trauma that these women have been through, and the men, and there have been many, many suicides of kids who were at the Nova Music Festival. You know, survivor's guilt, and they've killed themselves. And I think that will see this trauma in Israel and in the Jewish community for decades. You know, this is just not.
I think the trauma for the parents is almost hard, but is hard also because, you know, the people who were captive, they're really focused on just getting through every day, and they're not, you know, feeling power. I mean, they're powerless, but a parent would be so powerless in that your child is a captive and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Ladies, excuse me, my computer went to La La Land. and I
Okay.
completely reboot, so I missed a lot of what you were just talking about.
All right. I'll send you the recording. But we were talking about Rachel's resilience. Leanne said that she still wanted to live and the tragedies that she went through. And I said I just, you know, referred it to the tragedies that's happening, you know, now in Israel.
Right.
And I'm trying to think what else we said. And Merle thought she was vain. But that was age appropriate. She's 17. Yeah. Evie.
Yeah, speaking of that, did any of you read the wonderful letter that Hirsch Poland's mother wrote just this week? I mean, I cut it out and saved it because I was in tears because it was so heartfelt and so, with all the sadness, the positivity, it's just the juxtaposition of the two were just so meaningful. So now that we're talking about survivor's guilt and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
I mean, that was just such a meaningful article. So I suggest, I think it might have been in either Haaretz or J Post or something like that this past
What
week.
was it? It was from who?
Hirsch Poland.
Mother.
The mom.
Hirsch's mother.
Hirsch's mother.
Mhm.
I
Haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I'll send it to
Open
you,
letter.
Vanessa.
Yeah.
I'm
that'd be good.
sorry.
I'll send it to you. It was just
Okay, send it to me. Yeah.
so meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. At the beginning of the novel, Rachel wants nothing more than to marry, and it is this wish that gives her hope of returning to a normal life. In light of this, why does she refuse the first two opportunities for marriage that arise?
Well, I know she
They
didn't want to be
they didn't meet
second
her
wife to this one.
expectations. She didn't like the way they looked. I mean, she was very focused on, you know, falling in love with somebody who met her her
Yes.
fantasy of a
Yes.
husband. Yeah.
Really good words, Sue.
She didn't want anybody else to choose who she was going to marry.
Mhm.
Even though that was the custom at the time, she was defying all the customs.
Yeah.
And this one in particular, she wasn't about to be told who she should marry.
I think once she got a taste of freedom, she realized, and that's really after she left the slave, you know.
Mhm.
And I thought that whole time that she was a slave in that house, and you know, she had a bed, she had clothes, and she had food, but that's about it. And she saw the love between the son and that, you know, the daughter of the other family, and how that went awry. So I think that, you know, she saw, I don't know if you want to call that true love, but she saw that love. And, you know, once you, once she was in the monastery and hid herself, you know, and she could learn and taught herself all of that, it, you know, it's hard to go back into that life. It's very hard to go back into that life. While being held as a slave at the Al-Harazi home, Rachel makes no attempt to escape for many months. What was it that finally enabled her to leave?
I would like,
Sandy.
I think a couple things happened. One is she had that interest in the chess game, and so that was the first time we saw she had intelligence and understood gameplay. But it wasn't until she saw, until the brother had to leave that she had a model as to, somebody leaving.
Khalil, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think she saw, what he had to do, and and she was also raped by the other brother there.
Right.
There was a lot of rape in the book, but I thought it was I didn't think it was gratuitous. I mean, I think that's what happened. I think
Well,
so. Lynn,
also, the brother who befriended her said to her, "Why aren't you leaving?" And it occurred to her that she did have a bed and she had a room, but she was able to make it on her own before. So she figured, why not? And she was really a risk taker, which is why she probably waited until she found the right person to be her husband, because she was willing to take the risk to make
Yeah.
sure that things were going to work for her.
right. I think that um it was 2 Sundays ago we heard Magda Brown's daughter Rochelle talk about her mom who was in Auschwitz, and um so and Magda has a website and stories, but she was a teenager. And I know that I've said this many times. The stories we have from the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, um, uh, almost any of them that you can think about, they were teenagers, because that's who survived to write the stories. So, um, this kind of reminds me of that. She was, we use the word a lot, resilient, but she was definitely resilient. Merle?
This morning at Synagogue Bethel, I heard a woman speak who had been a hostage, and she was released after 2 weeks, and she was with her daughter. Her name was Judith Renan, and her daughter Natalie, graduated from Deerfield High School. The mom lives in Evanston. And she said one of the things she said to her daughter when they were in captivity is, "You've got 5 guards protecting you. You're given these meals every day. You're not going to be hurt while you're here because we're American. They're not going to hurt us." And she got her daughter into this frame of mind where she could relax. And then they were released after 2 weeks. But
Yeah.
she was so worried about her daughter getting into this state of mind where she was terrified. And she said, "You're being treated like a queen here. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." I thought it was wonderful that her mother put her at ease.
Yeah. 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 I haven't heard that story, but yeah. And look, I mean, it's all happenstance. I mean, Hirsch Goldberg was, he was American, and they killed him.
Well, you can see her story on YouTube. Her name is
Okay.
Judith Raanan. And there's
Ra'anan.
several interviews. She met President Trump right before he was president, and
Yeah.
she was given an award. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. What does this story suggest about the place of a woman in organized religion, in Judaism specifically? Well, I was super disappointed with the monks, although obviously it was totally on brand, once they found out she was a woman, and they shunned her.
Except for Anton.
Yes. And Anton gave her the map, and then she got to his people, and yada yada. But yeah. I mean that one, and y- how can you, and she had cut her hair by then, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally.
But Vanessa, at the time, you have to think that monks are not going to be too happy about having a woman,
Yeah.
or whatever her circumstances are.
Yeah.
And the guilt of, I'm sorry, I have to get a call.
I think even now, if think about
Wait.
the reverse, if it was a man hiding as a woman in a convent, it would still be offensive.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Probably.
they've given themselves, the vow of no temptation and celibacy and,
Right. I mean, Anton was married.
well,
No,
yes,
he
yeah,
gave all
before
that up.
And
He
then
gave it
gave
all
up.
up.
he gave it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had children too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that, but
Yeah.
I don't live that life. So, oh, she's still on the phone. Let's see what else she wants. Yeah. So, and I wonder if they, once she revealed she was a woman, and of course it happened because she got sick and the doctor saw her, who happened to be a Jewish doctor. I mean, listen, it's fiction. There was a lot of coincidences. I'm sure it probably clicked, like, oh yeah, she looks very, I'm sure she had no facial hair.
Don't you wonder how she hid her periods or,
Yeah.
I thought about that.
yeah, like how do you bathe? I mean, is everybody bathing in a river?
Well,
Or they do
she
it-
talked about the bathing, that
Yeah.
she will, they went, she didn't go when they went, and she
Yeah.
had to go, and into the stream even when it was cold, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Didn't she
you
go
can
when it was dark
only,
outside too?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can only imagine the smells.
Oh,
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And the
because,
dirt.
if she was hiding her cycles, I mean, that does have a smell. Yeah.
That's a full-time job in itself.
right.
And especially back then, they would use rags. They wouldn't,
Right.
there was no
Tampon.
Tampax,
I also think though, when you are running and you're not eating regularly, you don't cycle regularly.
Right.
So, and she wasn't with any other women, so she
That's
wouldn't be cycling with them, and
true.
um,
With all her trials and tribulations, you never know. She could have, maybe stopped menstruating here and
mhm.
with all the stress and everything she was going through, I'd be surprised if she wasn't regular.
Right.
That's a good point.
Again, in the Holocaust, they, people didn't always have their cycles because they, weren't
They
eating.
were starved,
Mhm. And the other thing today is, because we have such a high fat diet, girls are getting their period earlier and earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Well, I wonder too, today, I don't even know the specifics in terms of how the transgender women or men, I never know which is which. I'm sorry, which
The men.
Right.
terminology, how they handle it in terms of where they are and so forth, it's just the practicality. I mean,
They're
I
a
think it's
trans
important.
man and they're on hormones. They're probably not cycling because their hormones, they're going to have hormone blockers for their female hormones. Plus, they'd be taking testosterone.
Ah, okay,
Elaine's
thank you.
correct.
Didn't
Sue.
think about that.
Well, I met a transgender man quite a few years ago at a demonstration. It was like a pro-choice demonstration, and there were people that were protesting who were anti-abortion, and they were everything. And this man was standing right next to me, and I said, "Look at that! All those men who could never become pregnant, and they're protesting against this. What do they know about pregnancy?" And he says to me, "I could be pregnant."
There was, I remember,
And
it was
I
it was
looked
a,
at him.
yeah.
I'm telling you, He had a beard. His voice, I would have never in a million years thought that he
Right.
had been born a woman. Never. And apparently he hadn't had surgery to remove the uterus. I mean, he didn't have a hysterectomy because he told me he could get pregnant.
But for them to get pregnant, and I remember there was a couple where, and it's like a man gets pregnant, but it was a trans man, and they have to go off of all the hormone blockers, off of all the testosterone. They have to go back on estrogen to get pregnant. So,
Now, I had an experience years ago when I was working at a company for a few months, and there was a trans person there, and it turned out that it was a man who was trying to be a woman, and he actually
so you call that a trans woman?
okay, thank you.
You're
And he
welcome.
they went into the woman's bathroom.
Because she looked like a woman.
Right, and I went in there not knowing that this person was there, and of course, he was standing in front of me.
She was standing, okay.
You know what? I
was
am not at
standing.
all threatened by people in the bathroom. That doesn't worry me at all.
No, I just think this happened way before all this trans stuff was I mean, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
So that was my very one and only experience like that.
All right, Andy.
I have a funny experience of actually a very wonderful woman who is transgender man. I don't know the president of our synagogue, and probably did not completely convert everything, as many men do not do. Okay.
I think
and no, it's
trans-
just, let me finish, please. So she and I walk into the washroom, and I wasn't hesitant at all. And she still has a low voice and just says as nicely as to be, and she's probably used to this all the time, says, we just each go in a stall and do our thing. And that was,
yeah. I
don't know why
think many trans people have different, things that they've done, either, to their bodies. And we had someone in the congregation, and her grandson is dating a trans woman, and she said, well, can I ask them? And I said to her, she has a granddaughter. I said, would you ask your granddaughter how she has sex? Well, no. I said, well, then you can't ask him. And I think that because it's so different, sometimes we think that we can just, say what's happening there. But if they want to share it, that's up to them. And maybe some of them do, but you wouldn't ask.
To ask them, like, have you had surgery? Well, bless your heart. It's none of your effing business,
Right. I mean, it would be like saying to a woman, did you have a breast,
enhancement.
enhancement?
Yeah.
And now listen, I think, especially with Jewish women, it's usually the other way. It's a breast reduction.
Right.
I was with someone, and it was my boyfriend at the time, and he goes, we saw someone, and he goes, she looks so different. And he kept saying it to her. You look so different. What? Well, you look so different. And she'd had a breast reduction in college. And we walk away. I go, she had a breast reduction. Stop saying that. So, those are things I think, and I think that those are normal boundaries. And I think those are all good boundaries. And
we sure got off of the book.
Yes. Okay. Back to the book. Some readers say they would have expected a different outcome for Rachel's life. How did you feel about the way the story ends? Sorry, Elaine.
It's all right.
Leanne.
I'm glad you're asking this question, and I don't know if anybody else feels this way. I was so disappointed in the ending. I was so disappointed in the sons. I could not believe, especially the one that really wanted to keep her memoir. and then the candle is burning and and I just couldn't
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah.
It just destroyed me.
Yeah, I was, you know, I was really, I was kind of sad because it's, you know, she ended up just going back to I thought, you know, the life that, you know, that life.
I felt there was
agree.
too much missing, though. I just felt there was too much, you know, at the end, I felt that there was too much of a gap for me.
Yeah.
I think she had to tie it up, but
Mhm.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Merle.
I just wanted to ask Leanne, how did you want it to end? What would you prefer?
I didn't want them to destroy her work. I thought about this because I thought, okay, who is it left to? Who is it meant to read then after her sons did? You know,
Maybe a granddaughter.
Yes.
perhaps. And I understand their, I don't know, it's like because they were so, you know, she's not who we thought she was. Nobody knows the story about her. This is some terrible things have happened, but um I just saw it the other way. How could they not be so proud of their mother and honor her by she wanted to write down her story and she wanted someone to find her story. And then they were just going to destroy it as if everything that she went through didn't have any meaning.
I have
I
some,
don't know.
I
Sandy, Susan, and then Andy or
I
Paula.
opened up a can of
I
worms.
went
Yeah,
back
it
and
did.
I
Yeah.
reread the prologue, I reread the end, the epilogue, and I was trying to piece together some of the facts. She was 60 when she died. And then I wondered if the older son was not her son, but from the husband's first marriage. And then
Yes.
the one who was so knowledgeable, he was the one who was studying and he was her. And then the daughter, I think was her daughter, took care of her and aged doing that because they talked about it. So
Right.
I wondered because a second son, he wavered about it.
Yeah. And one of them had to be Lucan's son, right?
Mm-hmm. The first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Her
Oh,
back,
the
yeah.
daughter. She
Right.
had a
The
daughter
daughter, right.
who took care of her.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think she was Ruth, and wasn't she the oldest? She was the
Right.
oldest of
She
her
was
children.
a- That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Susan.
Well, first of all, I agree with Leanne. I think it was awful that they burned that they burned up all her words. But I think the reason they did it, and they say so, is they were embarrassed. Because if this got out and if anybody else saw it, and we have to remember of the times they were living in, it was this heavily patriarchal society where women didn't count for a whole lot of anything. And it
Absolutely.
wasn't only Judaism, it was other religions as well.
Right.
And they felt that their reputation would be tarnished among their, you know, their friends, their relatives, if this got out, that their mother could read and write and what she had done and all this other stuff. And I think it was from embarrassment that they did that. I too was disappointed. I wish they hadn't, and I wish they hadn't been so embarrassed. But on the other hand, we have to remember the times this was
Yeah.
being written
It
in
was realistic.
for.
Yeah.
It was
And we're
realistic to the
seeing it
time.
through the lens of 21st century eyes.
Exactly.
Right, right. So
Exactly.
you have to take yourself kind of back there
Yeah.
and remember what year this was.
Yeah. Marilyn, then Paula.
And another thing that they were so shocked is that she was writing in the Christian language. I think that really got to them too. Besides what she went through and living in the monastery and all of these other things that she went through, like you said, she was an embarrassment to them at that point. All the things in her life were not what they were used to. But I think a lot of the time that she spent with the monks and all of that, that really bothered them because that was not her being a true Jewish woman.
Yep. Paula, then Merle. Paula.
I think everybody spoke very well to what I was kind of tried to articulate, but I also think that suffering in that time, I think people believe would lead to divine punishment as well.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
and so our way of looking at situations like this with more empathy are not what ancient people could have done.
Yeah.
And she went back to her traditional life.
Yeah. Moral.
Thought it was so hard to remember that it was a period piece because everything she did was so modern. Right from the beginning, when she saved the boy who had fallen off the horse, the young man who had fallen off the horse,
Yeah.
and she said, I can tell you, my father's a doctor. I kept thinking, wow, maybe she's going to do something with medicine when she runs away because she really seems to knows quite a bit. And then you realize the year the story takes place, what, 854? I mean, it was
Yeah.
so long ago. I think they had to burn her diary because it would have been so scandalous what she did.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I think, and I want to go back, I think that today, if a Haredi woman, had done this, an ultra-Orthodox woman, and there was this, a diary, they'd also be embarrassed. So I don't think over 1,000 years so much has changed. And I'm sure people, keep those stories. I want to go back to the place of women in organized religion. I don't think Christianity, Islam, Judaism, I don't think any of them treated women well. And I think it was, do we think it was any better in Judaism?
I think women were subservient to the
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
all of these religions.
Yeah. Andy.
To say that a woman's role was to have babies.
Yeah.
And to become educated or to get yourself raped, or, it was like your fault, not the fault of who did it. So there was a lot of shame back then.
And again, I think back to my family, and these aunts and uncles are no longer living, but she was actually a cousin, and I don't know, she would have been in her 90s. So let's say she was born in the 30s. And there was 2 daughters and a son in the family, and the son was super smart and the daughter was super smart, but she didn't go to college. They expected her to get married. And they went to college, law school, they paid for everything. I mean, this was 80 years ago. And, I do feel we've broken that cycle. My personal children all got the same, chances for education. But, to think that we have lived to see women who were, had to face that, it's almost hard to believe. And I think that, we need to tell our daughters and our granddaughters more of those stories so they know, because we're here because of the women, we stand on the shoulders of these women. And yeah, we had, for adult enrichment, this Rabbi Dov Linzer and Abigail Pogrebin, who's, she's written books, blah, 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 on her own, but her mother was Letty Pogrebin, Letty Cotton Pogrebin, and, as an old feminist, and her PR person sent me email after email. This is how you pronounce it. And then I finally said, I know how to pronounce her name. And I'm sure it's pronounced incorrectly. But, she was Letty Cotton Pogrebin was the founder of Ms. Magazine. And, it's like, when you think about it, it is living history. Because before that, it could have been Rachel in Iraq, the same thing.
My mom often talked about that both of her brothers went to college and she never did.
Yeah. Evie, then Sue.
Well, I also think that embarrassment and shame is a generational thing. I mean, how many of us were never embarrassed by what our parents did or didn't do and so on and so forth? And I could feel the same thing with my kids, where um whatever I did or didn't do certainly embarrassed them. But I think that that's part of it too. It's their parents, but and also just the things that maybe a generation away or certainly a number of hundreds of years, we see things so differently. I mean, I didn't have friends whose mothers worked, so I was very embarrassed by that, having a working mother and it just being out of the norm and so forth. And so I just think, the things that are painful to us or embarrassing at the time takes a certain amount of maturity and separation for us to realize. I also did not know anybody who had a family that was in the Holocaust. So that was, I mean, all those things when you don't see it around you can be very embarrassing. So I can understand how the sons, I didn't like the fact that they felt the way they do, but I could understand it.
Yeah, I think all good points. Sue, and then Leanne.
So listening to everybody makes me think how lucky I was to have the parents that I had. I mean, I'm not going to keep it a secret, but I'm going to be 86 years old in March. And I was born in 1939. And my parents were very modern in many ways. My mother was a modern woman. And when my father's business went bankrupt, my mother went to work. She became the head of, you've heard of the Feinberg at Northwestern. My mother was the private secretary to Dr. Feinberg that is named after.
Wow.
I mean, and she always, I was sent to college just like I'm the oldest child, and they made sure that I was prepared to go to college, and so were as well as my brothers. And if I had wanted to go to graduate school, I could have. I mean, anything I wanted.
Right. I'm going to get to Leanne, but did a lot of your friends, Sue, drop out to get married?
Drop out of school?
Drop out of
No,
college.
they got married. Some of them got married in college, but they finished
They
school.
finished. Okay.
And I was engaged as a senior in college,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and got married right after we graduated.
Yeah.
But
What's
I
your
mean,
birth date, Sue?
pardon?
March what?
6th.
Oh, I'm March 10th, and I'll
Oh,
be 83.
are you the same age?
No, I'll be 83.
Oh, well, you're younger than I am.
I'm a
You're
little
just a
younger.
kid.
We're March babies, and so
Yeah.
is Vanessa.
Yeah.
Yes, Vanessa, you're March 8th, aren't you?
I'm March 4th.
March
Oh,
4th.
4th.
Today is would have been my parents', I don't know, 70 something anniversary. My dad died. And they got married in between semesters.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because, I'm sure my mother would hate me saying this, but you didn't have sex. So if you had to get married.
Yeah.
And that's what they did.
Right.
All right,
No.
Leanne.
I just, after listening to everyone's response, I understand the viewpoint in terms of the way the sons felt. But if I go back to Rachel and how she was, if it was a turn of events and she had found this, let's say, diary, I do not believe, knowing what we know about her and how she was and what she valued, that she would have destroyed it. I think she would have carried it with her. So I
Absolutely.
think that's the part that was hard for me
Yeah.
to wrestle, because the whole book was about her and how unique
Yeah.
and wonderful and amazing she was. And I think that's where I, saw the discrepancy that was a little hard for me to swallow. I don't think she would have destroyed it. So
I
that was
yeah. I mean, yeah. Paula.
And I think also, Leanne, your point so well taken, but there was this gap of time between the end of her journey, and now it's her funeral, and they're like, what got her back to, what city did she die in? Where was she? Galilee? She was back in,
She's back in Israel.
back in Israel. So I think if that had been fleshed out maybe a little more, it wouldn't have left us all with the jaw drop, you know.
Yeah, listen, I think it was long enough, but I think at the end she just is like, well, I gotta finish this.
Wrap it up.
That's how I felt. She's like, let's go. I'm gonna finish this. And Elaine, you gotta finish it because there are,
You
there's
don't feel that way about a lot of books. There's a lot of books I
Yeah.
read that I feel like they rush to the ending and to tie everything up with a little bow.
right.
Yeah. Like the
Right.
Sunday night term paper, it
Yeah.
just got finished too quick.
Right.
Was the daughter Ruth involved in the decision to destroy? I don't think she was.
No.
So she might have held a different feeling if she was asked.
No, the brothers are the only ones who saw it. They never showed it to anyone else.
Yeah. Because they were ashamed. They were ashamed.
Oh, I think it's because this is the whole thing, that the men got to make all the decisions.
Yes.
That's right.
The first name of this book was Entelechia. Why do you think the author changed it? Which of the two titles better describes the book? So I had to look it up, and I looked it up, and it's like in Italian, but I think it means, that you have to fulfill your destiny.
I think it's obvious why they changed it. Nobody knows what intellect means.
Exactly. Actuality or realization as opposed to potentiality.
Oh, okay.
I mean, everyone would have been like, what? And I think it's 100% better title.
Yeah. That was going to be my question. Why do you think it was called The Wayward Moon? I mean, she was wayward. She definitely went off of the beaten track. And so that would be my guess. But, is there anybody have any other ideas?
Well, the other woman, the mother's whose name was Luna, doesn't that also mean
right?
Yeah.
Moon.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And actually, a lot of times the author doesn't have a ton of input into the title. A lot of times the author might suggest a few different titles, but it's the editor and the publisher that make the final call many times.
Yeah. I mean, this is her first book, so who knows? I mean, I think this is an old copy, but I think it's a beautiful.
I have the same one.
I do
It's
too.
Same
beautiful.
one.
And
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I like it.
the other thing.
Merle.
Every time I go to the dentist, I pass by this office that's called Pulling Down the Moon. And I found out it was a fertility clinic.
Yeah.
So I think moon is associated with women and fertility and their
Yeah.
cycle.
Monthly.
That
Yeah.
her cycle was wayward, that she was wayward.
Yeah.
She was there. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was taken by the name of the monastery, Mar or something or other. And Mar is a Hebrew word for bitter.
Yes.
So I just, didn't know if that was the atmosphere there or the bitterness. But that's just
It's also Hebrew for Mr. Like Mar, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. So that could be, yeah.
So it could be that.
Mar Yuhanan.
Right. And I didn't know if that was, Yochanan, I didn't know if that was off of a Hebrew word or I don't, and I didn't Google that. So, in the epilogue of the book, Rachel's two sons argue over the fate their mother wanted for the manuscript, for them to find and preserve her story or for them to destroy it. I think we've talked about this. What are your thoughts on what Rachel would have wanted? What does this conflict suggest about the issues of truth and memory? I think we all
She wanted it to stay hidden.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty well hidden.
Yeah. I wonder if she wanted like a further generation to find it.
That's my feeling.
Yeah. I also listen in the Mideast because it's dry there. You couldn't hide something here. It would mold and rot and be gone in a year. But there, it's dry. The Dead Sea Scrolls, you can find things that are thousands of years old. I mean, it's not, unthinkable. So, but what does this conflict suggest about issues of truth and memory? Maybe they didn't want to remember her that way.
Well, but
I
the
think
last
that's-
line in the book is "May her blessed memory live on."
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
well, that's very Jewy.
I understand, but I think
I think it has more to do with societal acceptance than truth or memory.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it
They
could be.
obviously didn't want anybody to know about their
Yeah.
mother's life.
Yeah,
And, you know, that's truth and it's also memory because they read it and they were all her memories of her entire life. And
yeah,
it was something that they just couldn't live with, I don't think.
yeah.
The interesting question is how she hid her intellectual abilities for her whole married life, raising a family.
Well, she was smart enough to do that.
Yeah.
And because I look, she'd been hiding her whole life,
She's been,
except when she was the daughter. I mean, as soon as she had to leave because she killed her father's murderer, she was hitting, she hid herself.
yeah.
So, and I
But-
think through the ages, women hide themselves and they don't ever want to appear smarter than, maybe their husband or someone they're dating or, um, they dumb it down. I taught 8th grade and this woman now is married with kids, but it was a beautiful girl and she was smart, but every time in class she would act like an idiot. And I think it was to flirt with the boys because, and I said something to her. I said, "You're smart. Why don't you let that out?" I remember being like, "Come on." Merle.
When I was
then-
a senior in high school, I was editor of the high school newspaper, South Shore High School, and I
Ooh.
wrote as my closing editorial before I graduated, girls, stop pretending that you're not smart. It's not just about your hairdo or your makeup. Stop pretending that you're not smart. So the people who are in charge of the newspaper, that is the teachers, had to discuss with other teachers at other schools if they could publish my editorial.
I'm sure. I'm
Because
sure. What
it-
year was it?
1963.
Hmm.
1963. So I was like, oh my God, why are they discussing it? It's the
Yeah.
truth. Why? So finally they published it. And I was, gratified that they did. But the fact that they didn't want to even admit that the
Yeah.
girls were pretending to be dumb.
Or they thought it was too political. Hey, if you find it, make us a copy. Evie.
Yeah, I had,
Terrific.
I had just the opposite experience. I think I was about 11 or 12 years old and I was missing a lot of school and had a lot of problems and I was really having difficulty in school. And my teacher at the time came up to me and accused me of trying to act stupid, trying to act, well, I don't know if she said stupid, just so that the boys would like me better. I didn't even know what she was talking about. I mean, I was really definitely having problems. And then she said this to me and I was totally famished.
Yeah.
So I think, what we kind of can assume and what's really going on with somebody, where's the truth there?
Merle, do you have a copy of it?
I don't. I don't know if South Shore High School still keeps all of those records, but
I'm going to say no.
Go you though. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Our next book is Leaving Eastern Parkway. Wait, I just.
Oh, and I think at least last week, I think it was free on Kindle Unlimited.
Yes, I think it is. I think you're right. And it's also Audible, it's free. And it's by Matthew Daub. I'll send this all out tomorrow. And it's a story of, as we say in the business, off the derech. Off the, the derech means the way, and he's off the derech. So I hope you like it. And we're meeting, and again, I'll send this all out tomorrow, Thursday, February 20th.
20th.
Right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Did you say February 20?
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's good seeing everybody.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. This was
This
such a good
week,
choice.
2 o'clock, I'm sorry, 1 o'clock, 12:30 Lox and Bagels, but 1 o'clock, it's Libby Hellman. She lives in the area, and she wrote a book about the Ritchie Boys. And the Ritchie Boys were German translators who lived in America and helped spy on Germany. And I'm
Should
gonna
be
have to tell her,
interesting.
but my grandson, Max Leiter, his great-grandfather was a Ritchie boy. So, I find it very interesting, and
Sure.
I hope you all come out. And then in 2 weeks, it's virtual. Ben Zeller is talking about artificial intelligence and religion.
Oh,
And I think that's gonna be outstanding. And, we have Friday nights. Look at your Macomb at home. If you need anything, let me know.
thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you,
It's great
Vanessa.
seeing
That's great.
everyone.
Thanks.
Great,
Thanks,
great session.
everybody.
You always give me so much to think about.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.